Hansol stomped across the gleaming floor of Orbital Station 7, her boots making angry clicks on the polished surface. The air smelled of recycled oxygen and the faint metallic scent that all space stations shared. She stopped at the edge of Docking Bay 12 and crossed her arms. The spot was perfect. It had the best view of the Andromeda Arm, with its swirling purple and blue gases visible through the transparent ceiling. More importantly, it was closest to the main elevators, meaning less time carrying groceries from her ship to her apartment. And Tahoe had taken it. His massive Taurian vessel sat smugly in her spot, its blue-tinted hull reflecting the starlight. Hansol had waited 3 full cycles to get this assignment, nearly 19 Earth months of paperwork, bribes, and careful relationship building with the Galactic Homeowners Association. "Excuse me," she called out, seeing Tahoe exit his ship. "That's my spot." The Taurian turned slowly. He stood nearly 7 feet tall, his blue skin shimmering under the bay lights. 4 eyes blinked at her in sequence rather than together, which Hansol knew was a sign of fake confusion. "Ah, the Earth representative," Tahoe said, his voice buzzing slightly through his translator. "Is there a problem?" Hansol pulled out her data pad and thrust it toward him. "GHA Assignment Order 45,923. This spot was given to me 3 days ago." Tahoe's mandibles clicked together, the Taurian equivalent of a dismissive smile. "How unfortunate. However, you'll find Diplomatic Code 772 gives priority to diplomatic vessels." He pointed to the small purple emblem on his ship's side. "I'm now the Assistant Trade Ambassador to Sector 9. "Since when?" Hansol demanded. "You were a cultural liaison last week." "Promotions happen quickly in the Taurian hegemony," Tahoe said, his upper eyes narrowing. "Unlike on Earth, where I understand advancement can take decades." Hansol felt her face grow hot. Humans were still newcomers to the galactic community. Earth had only been invited to join 30 years ago, after humans proved they could travel faster than light. Most species had been part of the community for thousands of years and never missed a chance to remind humans of their baby species status. The assignment was confirmed and processed, Hansol insisted. "You can't just override it with a convenient promotion." Tahoe's skin rippled with blue patterns, a sign of amusement. "Perhaps on your primitive Earth, such distinctions weren't necessary. But here, hierarchy matters. Diplomatic vessels have priority over residential ones." An older Merlian floating nearby on its gravity disk turned to watch the argument, its tentacles curling with interest. Hansol realized she was creating a scene. As Earth's residential coordinator for this sector, she needed to maintain dignity. "I'll check the bylaws," she said more calmly. "There must be exceptions for previously confirmed assignments." "Check all you wish," Tahoe said, turning away. "The rules are quite clear." Hansol watched him walk toward the elevator, his long legs carrying him gracefully across the bay. She heard him chatting with a group of other non-humans as the doors closed, followed by chirps of laughter. Hansol looked at her own ship, now forced to dock in Bay 37, a dark, distant corner of the station where the garbage vessels usually parked. It would be a 15-minute walk to her apartment, through sections of the station inhabited primarily by methane breathers. "This isn't over," she muttered, pulling out her datapad again. She headed straight for the administrative level. The GHA offices were located in a quiet corridor decorated with plants from various worlds. Hansol nodded politely to a group of jellyfish-like beings floating in the waiting area before approaching the front desk. "I need to file a formal complaint," she told the receptionist, a 4-armed humanoid named Dae-sung. "Nature of complaint?" Dae-sung asked without looking up from his screen. "Parking dispute and improper reassignment," Hansol said firmly. "And I want to check if Ambassador Tahoe's diplomatic credentials were properly filed before the reassignment occurred." Dae-sung's eyes widened slightly. "You're challenging a Taurian diplomat's credentials. That's unusual." "So is stealing someone's assigned parking spot," Hansol replied. I'll wait. As Dae-sung reluctantly began processing her request, Han-Sol sat down in the waiting area. She knew this might cause diplomatic tensions, but principles mattered. If humans let themselves be pushed around over parking spots, what would be next? Humans needed to show the galaxy they wouldn't be treated as second-class citizens. Han-Sol opened her datapad and began researching GHA bylaws. If there was a loophole, she would find it. No blue-skinned diplomat with a freshly painted credentials badge was going to take what was rightfully hers. This wasn't just about a parking spot anymore. It was about respect. Ji-woo leaned against the doorframe of Han-Sol's apartment, watching as she surrounded herself with glowing screens. The small living space was barely visible under the sea of datapads, holographic projections, and old-fashioned paper notes. A half-eaten meal sat forgotten on the counter. "You're still pursuing this?" Ji-woo asked, stepping carefully over a stack of legal reference manuals. "It's been 3 weeks." Han-Sol didn't look up from the ancient text she was reading. The translation software struggled with the 5,000-year-old legal jargon of Galactic Ordinance 7293B. "It's not just about the parking space anymore," she said, rubbing her tired eyes. "And pass me that datapad, would you?" Jae-woo handed her the device. As Earth's liaison officer on the station, he dealt with all sorts of human complaints, but Han-Sol's determination was something special. "You've submitted 15 amendments to your lawsuit," he pointed out. "The GHA legal office is threatening to fine you for wasting resources." Han-Sol finally looked up. Her hair was messy, and dark circles had formed under her eyes. "It's about precedent, Ji-woo. If they can take our parking spots today, what will they take tomorrow?" Jae-woo sighed. "The other human residents think you're making us look bad. Like we can't handle the small stuff without throwing a fit. Let me show you something." Han-Sol pulled up a map of the station on her main screen. Several spots were highlighted in red. These are all properties assigned to Tae-ho. "So, he has a big family. Many Taurians do. Now watch this." She switched to a map of Orbital Station 9, 2 systems away. More red spots appeared. Then she switched to Orbital Station 12. More red spots. Jae-woo stepped closer, his interest piqued. "That's unusual. One Taurian diplomat with property rights across 3 major stations, all near human quarters." Han-Sol pulled up another screen. "And look at the timing. Each acquisition happened within days of a human resident being reassigned." "Could be coincidence," Jae-woo said, but he didn't sound convinced. "I thought so too, until I found this." She showed him a database of assignment requests. Every human reassignment was processed by the same administrator, someone named Sunmei. "I know Sunmei. She's not even Taurian. She's Proximan." Han-Sol nodded. "Exactly. But look at her banking records." Jae-woo's eyes widened. "How did you get access to those?" "I may have befriended someone in financial records," Han-Sol said with a small smile. "The point is, Sunmai receives a payment from an anonymous account every time a human gets moved, and a Taurian takes their place." Jae-woo sat down heavily on the only clear chair. This goes way beyond a parking dispute. I think the Taurians are systematically pushing humans to the outer rings of every station," Han-Sol said quietly. "It's subtle enough that nobody notices one parking spot or one apartment reassignment. But over time, they're creating Taurian-dominated zones." Ji-woo finished. "But why?" Han-Sol pulled up a star chart. "These stations form a direct trade route to the new mining colonies in Sector 15. The ones humans were granted access to last year. The implications hung in the air between them." "You need to take this to the station chief," Ji-woo said finally. Han-Sol shook her head. "Not yet. I need more evidence, and the station chief plays golf with Tae-ho's supervisor." She picked up another datapad and typed rapidly. "That's why I'm being so persistent with this lawsuit. It gives me legal access to records I couldn't see otherwise." Jae-woo watched as she worked, impressed despite himself. "So what's your next move?" I've requested records of all property transfers in the past 5 years involving humans and Taurians. Hansol plugged a small drive into her system. I'm downloading everything I find to this secure drive. If something happens to me. Nothing's going to happen to you, Ji Woo interrupted. Hansol gave him a serious look. If something happens, take this to Ambassador Kim on Earth Central. Don't trust anyone else. Ji Woo nodded slowly. Be careful, Hansol. If you're right, they won't be happy about you digging into this. That's why I'm keeping up the appearance of being obsessed with just my parking spot, she said with a tired smile. Let them think I'm just a crazy human who can't let go of a petty grievance. As Ji Woo left, Hansol turned back to her screens. A notification flashed that her request for a formal hearing had been granted. She smiled grimly. The Taurians thought they were humoring her, giving her a chance to embarrass herself publicly before dismissing her case. They had no idea what she'd discovered, and by the time they realized it, she would have all the evidence she needed. The central arbitration chamber was more crowded than Hansol had expected. She felt a flutter of nervousness as she noticed beings from at least 12 different species filling the observation area. Word had spread about the stubborn human challenging a Taurian diplomat, and it had become the day's entertainment. Hansol straightened her formal suit and placed her data pad on the petitioner's table. Across the room, Taiho sat calmly, surrounded by 4 legal advisors who whispered to each other behind translucent screens. Their confidence was obvious. All rise for Judge Du Yun, called the court announcer. The chamber fell silent as the judge entered. Du Yun's crystalline body caught the light, sending rainbow reflections across the walls. As a member of the Crystallis species, his emotions were visible through color changes in his transparent form. Right now, a slight amber tint suggested annoyance. Case number 47,293, Hansol versus Taiho, dispute over docking bay 12. The judge's voice resonated through the chamber. I see the human petitioner has no legal representation. Hansol stepped forward. I will represent myself, Your Honor. A murmur spread through the audience. Self-representation was rare in galactic courts, where legal systems from thousands of worlds intersected in complex ways. The human insists on proceeding without counsel. Judge Du Yun announced, his crystalline form shimmering with deeper amber. This is most irregular but permitted under Article 7 of Galactic Due Process. Taiho's lead counsel, a tall Taurian with ornate facial markings, stood. Your Honor, given the petitioner's lack of experience, we request a summary dismissal. This dispute is over a simple parking assignment that followed all proper protocols. I have evidence that protocols were not followed, Hansol countered. And this case has broader implications for station security and resource allocation. Judge Du Yun's color shifted slightly toward green. Interesting claim. Proceed with your presentation, Petitioner Hansol. Hansol activated her holo display. Thank you, Your Honor. She began methodically, starting with the specific regulations governing her parking assignment. The audience seemed bored at first, some even checking their own devices. This was exactly what Hansol wanted, to appear obsessed with just her parking space. As precedent, I cite the Regelian Housing Act of Star Date 3392, which established that retroactive credential changes cannot invalidate prior legal agreements, she continued. From his position beside the judge's platform, Bailiff Suho watched the proceedings with 3 eyes. The central one, Hansol noticed, fixed firmly on Taiho rather than on her. Suho's species, the Trilopians, were known for their ability to track multiple focal points independently. Something about Taiho had caught his attention. Hansol continued through 18 different precedents, carefully building her case. The audience grew restless, but she noticed several legal aides taking notes. Her arguments were sound. Now, regarding the diplomatic status that supposedly grants Ambassador Taiho priority, Hansol said, changing her display, I found inconsistencies that suggest improper certification. Taiho shifted in his seat, His mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of agitation. These inconsistencies led me to investigate further, Hansol continued, and I discovered that Ambassador Taiho holds property rights to 17 different locations across 3 stations. The chamber grew quieter. This was no longer about a parking space. Each property was previously assigned to human residents who were relocated under questionable circumstances, Hansol said, displaying a map. When overlaid with the primary trade routes to the new mining colonies in Sector 15, a pattern emerges. The Taurian legal team huddled together, whispering urgently. Taiho was now visibly agitated, his skin patterns shifting rapidly. I believe this represents a systematic effort to... That's quite enough speculation. Judge Du Yun interrupted, his form now pulsing between amber and red. This hearing was scheduled to address a single parking dispute, not to entertain conspiracy theories. Hansol noticed the quick glance exchanged between the judge and Taiho. It lasted only a split second, but it confirmed her suspicions. I request permission to enter these documents as evidence, Hansol insisted. We will take a recess to review what is admissible, Judge Du Yun declared, rising quickly. This hearing will resume tomorrow at the same time. As people began to leave, Hansol caught Bailiff Suho still watching Taiho with his central eye. When Suho noticed her observation, he quickly looked away. Hansol packed her materials, ignoring the whispers around her. She had accomplished what she wanted for today, planting the seed in public record. Several journalists were already sending out reports. As she left the chamber, Jiwoo was waiting outside. You made quite an impression, he said quietly. The station's abuzz with talk about Taurian property grabs. Did you secure the backup copies? Hansol asked in a whisper. Jiwoo nodded. Everything's safe. But Hansol, be careful tonight. I don't think the judge was happy with where you were going. I know, she replied, glancing back at the chamber doors where Taiho and Judge Du Yun were now speaking privately. They'll try to stop tomorrow's session. And if they can't, Hansol smiled grimly. Then we'll see just how far they're willing to go to keep their scheme hidden. The courthouse cleared slowly after Judge Du Yun's abrupt recess. Hansol stood near the exit, watching carefully as the judge disappeared through a private door, with Taiho close behind. She had expected this, but seeing it happen still made her stomach tighten. Her data pad buzzed with an urgent message from Jiwoo. Requorities being per GD from May in data vasi, vascup secure, but originals dice appearing. Not anymore. Suho pointed to another screen where the security system was now showing Taiho being detained by station security at the diplomatic docking bay. His face showed pure shock as officers surrounded his vessel. The system is replaying all flagged security incidents from the past hour, Suho explained. It seems your unorthodox methods have produced results. Hansol retrieved her wet data pad from the fountain. Sometimes you have to make a splash to get attention. Suho's mouth twitched in what might have been the Trilopian version of a smile. Indeed, though I would appreciate if you didn't grab judicial officials in the future. No promises, Hansol said, squeezing water from her hair. Not when there's corruption to expose. The grand chamber of the Galactic High Council gleamed with polished stone and ancient metals. Delegates from 200 worlds filled the curved rows of seats. Many had traveled for days to witness this unusual hearing. Hansol stood at the center of the chamber, wearing a formal blue suit. Her hair was neatly arranged, and she had practiced standing straight without fidgeting. Behind her, enormous screens displayed maps, transaction records, and property transfers. The 7 high counselors sat on elevated platforms. They represented the oldest species in the galaxy. High Counselor Minji, the first human ever appointed to this position, leaned forward with interest. You may present your findings, Representative Hansol, said the chief counselor, a Vordaxian whose age was measured in centuries. Hansol took a deep breath. 3 weeks ago, she had been fighting over a parking space. Now she addressed the highest authority in the galaxy. What began as a dispute over a parking space revealed a systematic campaign to undermine human settlement rights, she explained, her voice steady. The evidence shows the Taurian consortium has been gradually acquiring property allocated to newcomer species. She touched her control pad, and the screen shifted to show a pattern of property transfers across 12 stations. By controlling key locations along trade routes, they established territorial dominance in violation of expansion treaties. Hansol continued. When humans received mining rights in Sector 15 last year, this campaign accelerated. The chamber remained silent as Hansol detailed how Judge Du Yun and 16 other officials had accepted bribes to reassign human properties to Taurian control. The goal was to create bottlenecks in the transport system, she explained. Humans would be forced to pay higher fees to move goods through Taurian-controlled zones. A Taurian delegate rose to object, but the chief counselor waved him down. Bailiff Suho, please step forward, the chief counselor called. Suho approached, his granite skin gleaming under the lights. His testimony was brief but powerful, describing the systematic corruption he had witnessed in the judicial system. I observed Judge Du Yun's unusual interest in human relocation cases for some time, Suho stated. Representative Hansol's actions, while unorthodox, exposed what many of us suspected but could not prove. High Counselor Minji nodded gravely. Bailiff Suho's testimony confirms judicial corruption in multiple sectors. This council commends your persistence, Representative Hansol. The chief counselor turned to the Taurian delegation. The evidence is overwhelming. The council finds the Taurian consortium guilty of treaty violations and attempted economic sabotage. The chamber erupted in discussion. Hansol stood quietly, still not quite believing she was here. Jadwu approached her as the session ended. Congratulations, he said with a wide smile. You've become quite famous. The first human to address the High Council over a parking dispute. Hansol laughed. Not exactly how I plan to make history. The Council's sanctions against the Taurian consortium are serious, Jiwu added. And they've ordered a complete review of all property assignments in 3 sectors. Hansol nodded. And Teho, awaiting deportation. His diplomatic credentials have been permanently revoked. Later that day, Hansol guided her shuttle toward Orbital Station 7. As she approached, she noticed something different about Docking Bay 12. Her parking space. It had been marked with a special blue border, the kind usually reserved for distinguished visitors. The station's traffic control contacted her as she approached. Representative Hansol, you are cleared for priority docking in Bay 12. This space has been permanently assigned to you by order of the station commander. Hansol smiled as she carefully maneuvered her shuttle into the spot. Through the view screen, she could see the beautiful swirl of the Andromeda arm. Inside her shuttle, a small package waited on her seat. It contained an official commendation from the Galactic Council and a curious small statue. A hand with the thumb pointed upward, the traditional human gesture for approval. A note explained that the Council had adopted this as a new official symbol representing human determination. It would be added to the Galactic Symbol database, recognized across all worlds. Hansol placed the statue on her dashboard and ran her fingers over the commendation. 6 weeks ago, she had been just another human resident struggling to be taken seriously. Now her actions had exposed a conspiracy and changed how the galaxy viewed humans. As she left her shuttle and walked toward the elevators, several aliens nodded respectfully. A young Taurian female even approached to express admiration for Hansol's courage. The message was spreading throughout the stations. Humans might be new to the galaxy, but they would not be pushed around, not even in a parking lot. That night, as Hansol looked out her apartment window at the stars, she thought about the power of persistence. Sometimes the biggest changes started with the smallest problems. Sometimes standing your ground over something as simple as a parking space could change the balance of power across the stars. And sometimes, justice came from the most unexpected places. As federal agents arrived to take Kang and Choi into custody, Jaho looked at the others with a mix of exhaustion and hope. Do you think this will really change anything? It already has, Su-min replied. The truth is out now. No one can hide it anymore. The federal courthouse on Earth was packed beyond capacity on the final day of the trial. For 6 weeks, people across the Sol system had watched as the case against Judge Ta-Won Kang and CEO Da-hyun Choi unfolded. Today would bring the verdict. Jae-ho sat in the front row between Hana and Do-yeon. Across the aisle, Su-min sat with the prosecution team, her face serious but her eyes bright with determination. All rise, the bailiff called as the 3 federal judges entered the courtroom. The lead judge, an older woman named Justice Reyes, looked out at the crowded room. In the case of Earth Federation versus Ta-Won Kang and Da-hyun Choi, we have reached our verdict. The room fell silent. On screens throughout the solar system, billions watched and waited. On the charge of judicial corruption, we find the defendant Ta-Won Kang guilty. A murmur ran through the courtroom. On the charges of abuse of power and violation of interspecies rights laws, we find the defendant Ta-Won Kang guilty. Do-yeon reached for Jae-ho's hand and squeezed it tightly. On the charges of conspiracy to commit forced labor and bribery, we find the defendant Da-hyun Choi guilty. Justice Reyes continued through the list of charges. Guilty, guilty, guilty. By the end, Judge Kang sat slumped in his chair, while Choi stared straight ahead, his face frozen in disbelief. Before we pronounce sentence, Justice Reyes said, "Does either defendant wish to address the court?" Kang's lawyer nudged him. Slowly, the former judge stood. "I believe I was protecting humanity," he said, his voice weak. "After my son died, I saw enemies everywhere. I was wrong." He looked toward Do-yeon. "I cannot bring back the years I took from innocent people. I can only say I am sorry." Justice Reyes nodded. "Mr. Choi." The CEO stood, straightening his expensive suit. "I maintain that stellar mining acted within the framework of existing laws. If those laws were flawed, blame the lawmakers, not those who worked within the system." Several people in the courtroom scoffed audibly. Justice Reyes frowned. The court has considered the severity of these crimes, their impact on hundreds of victims, and the breach of public trust. She paused. "Judge Ta-Won Kang, this court sentences you to 15 years in federal prison Alpha on Mars." A shocked silence fell. No Earth judge had ever been sent to a Mars prison. Da-hyun Choi, this court sentences you to 20 years in federal prison Alpha on Mars. Additionally, Stellar Mining Corporation is fined 50 billion credits, with the money to be distributed to the victims of your scheme. As the defendants were led away, the courtroom erupted in conversation. Jae-ho turned to Hana, who was crying quietly. "We did it," he said simply. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed around them. Do-yeon, now officially recognized as the Altarian ambassador to Earth, stepped forward to speak. "Today marks a new beginning for justice in the Sol system," she said, "not just for Altarians or Proximans, but for all species who share this space." 3 months later, Jae-ho, Hana, and Su-min stood in the observation gallery of the Federal Senate as Do-yeon presented the first draft of the Galactic Judicial Reform Act. "This law will establish new standards for interspecies justice," she explained to the senators. "Independent review of all sentencing patterns, mandatory cultural training for judges, and safeguards against exploitation of prison labor." One senator objected. "These protections go too far. Earth must protect its interests." "Earth's interests are not served by injustice," replied Senator Kim, the bill's human co-sponsor. "This reform protects everyone's rights, human and non-human alike." The debate lasted for weeks, but in the end, the act passed with a strong majority. On the day it became law, Jae-ho received an invitation to visit Lunar Correctional Facility. There he found Nari, Do-yeon's cousin, waiting for him with 20 other former prisoners of Judge Kang. "We've been released," she told him. "All of us. Our cases were reviewed and our sentences overturned." Jae-ho smiled. That's wonderful news. But it's not why I asked you here, Nari continued. We want to help identify others who were wrongly convicted. Hundreds are still in stellar mining facilities. It's going to be a lot of work, Jaiho warned. Yes, Nari agreed. But now we have something we didn't have before. She looked around at the others. Hope. 1 year later, Jaiho stood with Hana, Sumin, and Du Yan on the observation deck of the newly established Interspecies Justice Center. Below them, human and non-human legal teams worked together, reviewing cases and developing training programs for the judiciary. I never imagined it would grow this big, Hana said, watching the busy scene. This is just the beginning, Sumin replied. The Reform Act is being implemented across all colonies now. Du Yan smiled. And 3 more species have asked to join the program. They want the same protections. Jaiho thought about Judge Kang, now serving his sentence on Mars. According to reports, he was helping to teach other prisoners and working to understand his own prejudices. Sometimes justice takes a long time, Jaiho said, but when it finally comes, it changes everything. As they looked out at Earth hanging in the black sky beyond the window, they knew the Sol system would never be the same. From one small data pattern, a revolution in justice had begun.